everybody. This is Susie Lucas.
Hey, I'm Byron Lucas.
And we are in the book Knowing Jesus Through the Old Testament by Christopher J.H. Wright. And we are in chapter 2 this week.
That's right.
And we thought that we would focus on questions 1, 2, and 3.
And 1, 2, and 3.
1, 2, and 3.
So that would be on page 108 if you're following along in your book. So this second chapter was called Jesus and the Old Testament Promise. So it's talking about promise and fulfillment. So really good chapter. A lot of really deep stuff in it. I guess a lot to think about. It's a lot to take in. And so again, we're going to focus on these 3 questions. So question 1, I'm going to read it to you. It says, study the fulfillment texts in Matthew chapter 1 and chapter 2. How does Matthew see the childhood of Jesus against the background of the story of Old Testament Israel and the promises of God, not just certain predictions coming true? And then how do these 2 chapters encourage people's faith in God and in the great story of the Bible, which centers on Christ? So it took me a while just to even understand the question. But it's basically saying, like, Matthew writes, he's writing to Jews, and so, how is he setting this in light of the full story of the Old Testament? How is he putting Jesus in it? I think that's kind of another way of saying the question.
And we talked about Matthew 1 a couple of weeks ago.
2 weeks ago.
All of the begets, and how the genealogy of Jesus tells basically the story of the Old Testament, and it's important to kind of dig into that, because if you separate Jesus from the Old Testament, you separate, or you just lose a lot of the impact that his coming brought, and that his life meant. And so it's important that you study that.
Yeah, absolutely.
And then in chapter 2, it goes on to, telling of his birth and kind of his childhood. And so, do you want to start? Do you want me to start?
We can. Well, I'll start with some of it. So I have some pretty short answers. Mine are kind of bullet points. What I did. I mean, look. And so when you look at this question, it's asking, how does he see the childhood of Jesus against the background of the story of the Old Testament? So here he is writing to Jews, and so he's reiterating the point that he's reiterating and showing that Jesus is the fulfillment of what was talked about in the Old Testament, and proving that Jesus is the Messiah, the Messiah that the Jews have been looking for, by showing things that were predicted, but really these fulfillments in Jesus. And so I was writing another sentence, but it ended up saying Jesus is the ultimate fulfillment of everything. But it should have said something different. But so Jesus is this fulfillment. And so for the Jews, it shows Jesus as a Messiah. It shows that promise that was made to Abraham is ultimately fulfilled in Jesus. And then for us today, which I guess I'm getting ahead to the second part of the question. For us, we see that God has a plan, and it is fulfilled, and it will be fulfilled. And so we're seeing the plan laid out, and we're seeing the connectivity of the Old Testament to Jesus, and how he fulfills the Old Testament and keeps the promises that were made. And then ultimately, when you get to Revelation, you'll see that what's going to be the ultimate fulfillment for all of us. So there's that hope. So you see the storyline of Scripture. You don't just see a snippet or a part. For us, we see the full plan, and we'll call it the plan of salvation for the nations in the world.
So, some things that I kind of stole from the book, just kind of key points that he points out in the chapter, was that the Old Testament tells the story that Jesus completes. And we were talking about suppose a kid in high school does these really amazing things, and is for us, like, in all-state band and all-state choir, and he's, straight A student and does all these things, then the high school teacher's going to think, man, this is a pretty great kid.
Yeah.
But then if you know the whole entire story, suppose it's me thinking about it from an elementary school perspective and me seeing, where that child started and seeing maybe what struggles they had in elementary school, maybe what their background was, then, for them to do all those wonderful things in, high school, it's like, oh, wow, well, wait till you hear the rest of his story. Like, once you know the whole background, then it fills out and makes, all of the fulfillment so much more glorious. Mm-hmm. And so for Jesus, if you just, start at the New Testament and you never read anything in the Old Testament, it's like you're just starting, you're just looking at what somebody has done, recently. Mm-hmm. And you're not seeing the whole backstory, and you don't get, it's just
depth.
so much
you don't get the depth.
more glorious. Yeah, when you see what all Jesus has done. So, and the Old Testament also declares the promise that Jesus fulfills. Like if you see Jesus, doing really awesome things, that's great. But when you know that it's a fulfillment of promises made to this one specific nation and this one specific person, like 2,000 years ago, well, then that's a whole different story altogether. Yeah. Because that, number one, proves that God is trustworthy and faithful, that he keeps his promises to 1,000 generations. If we can see it back that way, then we can also know that he's going to keep his promises to 1,000 generations forward. Yeah. Jesus is the answer. God had a purpose and God made a promise, and Jesus is the answer, to that. And let's see, it says, and it talks about kind of Jesus being the fulfillment of all of the covenants, God had made, all the specific ones, like the one that he made to, David. Jesus is the ultimate heir to the throne of David, and he's called both the source of David and the royal branch. Mm-hmm. And so he is claiming his kingdom, and this house and this dynasty and this forever kind of promise that God made to David specifically. And then you think about the promises made to Abraham and to Noah, that all the nations would be blessed because of you, and to Noah that he would never destroy, the world again, and
by water.
By water, yeah. And so in Jesus, then, in those first stories, like of his childhood, you see once again the extent of God's work of salvation. It's completely universal, and it's and the book points out that it's interesting that you have foreigners entering the story for specific reasons. Like the Magi come from the east, whereas Jesus moves to the west, to Egypt. And so you have this coast to coast kind of universal fulfillment of what Jesus means in that context. And then God calling Jesus out of Egypt just reminds them that the greatest thing that God had done for Israel has its counterpart physically in the life of Jesus. So he's making that Jesus and Israel connection. Like, Israel, this is your person. Yeah. This is the fulfillment of everything.
Where Israel was taken, them coming out of Egypt, that was the
moment.
A pinnacle moment.
Yeah, that was redemption.
Right. And so now Jesus coming out of Egypt, that much time later, it just shows more on that redemption.
And then I just wrote down, he is the fulfillment of all predictions. And in question 3, we're going to talk about the difference between prediction and promise. And there were over 400 predictions made about Jesus in the Old Testament, and he fulfilled every single one of them. And that's in itself is just mind-blowing.
It's insane.
And just, the chances of that happening by chance, well, that's crazy. That would never happen. It happened, because it was planned and purposed by God.
Yeah.
But more importantly, He was the fulfillment of the promises.
Yeah.
And we're going to talk about why promises are more significant than predictions.
Right.
A little bit later.
Okay. So that's our answer to 2.
Did we answer the question?
I feel like, like the second part, how do these 2 chapters encourage people's faith? I kind of hit on that a little bit. It's just, it's the hope, and you dealt with it too. It's that hope and trust that you gain knowing that God is faithful, which I think we said. Okay.
And the fact that, this is the same God that has been, since the beginning of time. Like, we can trace it, back.
All the way back.
All the way back.
And He's always faithful.
If Jesus just comes down, and, bam, brand new religion, well, that's a little bit harder
than if you know the full story.
Right. Yeah.
All right, question 2. It says, read Isaiah 7, the Emmanuel sign. So read Isaiah 7. It's interesting anyway. What did it mean at Horizon 1 for Ahaz and the people of Judah at that time? How did Matthew reuse it as at Horizon 2 in relation to the conception and birth of Jesus? And then how does it reach right to Horizon 3 when God promises in Revelation 21 through 22 that He will dwell with us forever? So, should we explain the Horizon 1, Horizon 2, Horizon 3?
Yeah, we learned years ago, and I think it's really helpful, is the kind of terminology already and not yet as far as fulfillment in the Bible goes.
Right.
Some things have happened already, and we talked about this, I think, when we talked about Daniel, and we talked about Revelation. Like, some
usually
things,
apocryphal writing, we either talk about this, the already not yet.
Yeah, some things have already been fulfilled, or they've been partially fulfilled because, it's already happened, but then there's this, like, coming fulfillment.
Right.
And then there might be another ultimate fulfillment. So, in our book, I think on, let's see, page...
I was going to try to find where it was talking about it. Yeah.
It has all these arrows. And it's not... but it says the historical flight path of a promise looks a bit like this. It's on page 81.
Thank you.
And it has all of these little, let's see if I can get up here. All of these little, kind of arrows. Like, here's the promise. And then, a promise was fulfilled and another promise made. Promise fulfilled, another promise made. And so on and so on and so on. And God loves to do that. It just kind of... we talk about it in education, kind of like a spiral curriculum. You introduce a concept, maybe in first grade, and then you touch on it again in second, and then you touch on it again in fifth, and it spirals and spirals, and your knowledge deepens. Right. And I think that's kind of what this is like.
Right.
You make one promise, and then it keeps
moving. So the Horizon 1, Horizon 2, Horizon 3 would be, Horizon 1 is like the Old Testament, for the immediate for where the Scripture is talking about.
Right. Like if Isaiah is prophesying, it's going to come true when Isaiah is still living.
And Horizon 2 is like not yet something that we had necessarily seen, but it's like the Jesus time. Horizon 3 would be future tense for us. So it's really kind of 2 past and 1 future. Is that right?
Yeah.
Is that an easy way to say it? So that's what we mean by these horizons. So there's when it was actually written, Isaiah writing it, it's Horizon 1. For us, where that is now, Horizon 2. And then what's that look like in the future. Okay?
So the main verse is really verse 14, I think, of chapter 7.
Of chapter 7, yeah.
And it's one you'll be really familiar with. It says, the virgin will conceive and give birth to a son and will call him Emmanuel. And then it goes on to talk about more what would have been the immediate fulfillment.
Right. So a little context. This is it's a message for Ahaz. Ahaz was a king, a Judean king, and at this time Syria.
He was a bad one.
Yeah, Syria and Israel were coming to attack Jerusalem, and so Isaiah is told to tell Ahaz that it's not going to happen. It's not going to happen immediately. But he's saying that there is going to come a time, he's predicting that there is going to come a time where Jerusalem's going to be decimated. It's going to be over. That's what's going on in this. So in Isaiah talking, he's saying that there will be a child born, and that child, by the time that child is able to make decisions, they will basically be in captivity in Babylon. Okay.
And so for like the initial fulfillment was in those days of Isaiah, and Ahaz would have and it may have been that son was already born.
Yeah,
you know?
could have
And
been.
basically he's saying as surely as that child was born to that woman and she named him Emmanuel, these things are surely going to happen to you. And for them, like for the house of David at the time and the kingdom of Judah, that Emmanuel sign was a sign of destruction. And just total. It was just awful.
Well, verse 20 is where it talks about Assyria coming in, and that's going to be Assyria is going to be coming in from the north, taking over the northern tribes, and then this is the southern kingdom. So that's in this same passage to give you some other context about it.
And really, the most recent covenant that was made to Israel was the one made to David and his descendants. That there would always be, a king on the throne. And that he would reign forever. And so for them, now the question is, well, if this destruction is going to happen, well, how in the world are we always going to have a king when, David's throne is going to be wiped away?
Yeah,
we have no more land. We have no more kingdom. It's all gone. So where is the promise now? Mm-hmm. And how will that be fulfilled to us now? And so that's why, at the time, so when they heard that for them was total devastation.
Correct.
Total destruction.
When you move forward to Horizon 2, are you ready to go to that one?
Yeah.
When you go to Horizon 2, something that I saw today that I had
is really cool.
That I've never seen before. I'm gonna pull this up and make sure I quote it right.
But Horizon 2 is the one you're familiar with. Is when in Matthew, when the angel appears to Joseph. Joseph is going to divorce Mary quietly, but the angel appears to him and says, no. The virgin will conceive and give birth to a son, and his name will be called Emmanuel, which means God with us.
So look at verse 20. This is the part that I saw today. Verse 20 says, as he considered this, talking about divorcing her, or really just annulling the engagement. As he considered this, an angel of the Lord appeared to him in a dream. Joseph, son of David, the angel said. And so when I read it, I was like, that's funny that here he's called Joseph, son of David, because I just had never thought of that before. And that was really kind of before I'd read the question. That's really bad of me, but I'd really thought about the questions. I was just reading. But he says Joseph, son of David. And I feel like now, having read all the questions and thought through all of this, that's really important because it's showing that reestablishment of the line of David, because Joseph was a descendant of David. And so you have this real connection of a descendant of David who is Joseph, who would be a son of David in that line, and then Jesus, who would be a son of David. So it's really interesting that is put there, Joseph, son of David.
So in Horizon 1, when Israel's wondering, where's David's descendant going to come from now? Well, then Matthew, right from the get-go in that chapter 1, or is it 1 or 2?
It's chapter 1, verse 20 is where he says that.
He says Joseph, son of David, and that should have been a wake-up call.
It was a big call
to everybody. Here it is. Mm-hmm. Here's what's happened, and here's how God's idea. His ways are far higher than our ways. That's where he really shows that to be true, I think.
And then it goes on. He goes on. God is with us, and talks about he quotes that Emmanuel verse, and it
so
says
now it's joy,
right? Yeah, and now it's like it's going to fulfill what the prophet had said, and now this gets everything back on track for the people of Israel and for the world now. So now it's that all nations. Now this gets it back on track.
So cool.
Yeah, it's really neat.
And I like how they just slide it in there. And when you dig, then you see it. But that's the beauty of reading scripture over and over again.
Because I would never would have thought about Joseph, son of David.
Yeah.
I never would have thought about why it would be there.
So important.
But it's really important.
And then you have Horizon 3. And I feel like we've talked about this a lot recently.
We really have.
But Revelation 21 and 22, where it talks about, it's the final Emmanuel, God with us, where God himself and his, all his goodness and all his kingdom is not just in a person coming down. All of the everything, all the goodness and the grace and the love is all coming down, and he will be with us. And it's a new heaven and new earth, and there will be no temple, there will be no sun or moon, for the Lord himself is their light. And all the nations will bring in their splendor. And it's that ultimate fulfillment. God is with us like he was with Adam and Eve in Eden.
So it's a total
reversal of
all
the curses.
Chapter 21, if you haven't seen that, Revelation 21, it's literally the new heavens and new earth. That's what it's talking about. Then I saw a new heaven and a new earth, for the old heaven and the old earth had disappeared. Sea was also gone, and I saw the holy city, the new Jerusalem, coming down from God, out of heaven like a bride beautifully dressed for her husband. That's chapter 21. Chapter 22 is
verse
really
16, I think. You want to skip to there?
That Jesus is coming. In chapter 22, yeah. So it says, I, Jesus, have sent my angel to give you this message for the churches. I am both the source of David and the heir to his throne. I am the bright morning star. And so here you have Jesus coming. It's Jesus coming and taking his place on the throne. So it's just a big reversal of everything it's kind of like a palindrome, I guess.
It really is. It's interesting.
Yeah, because I do too, because it starts here and it goes down and then it comes right back up. So how it starts and how it ends are very similar. So that's a neat one.
Yeah.
Let me think. I think that's it. So here we see, God with us is kind of the destruction of David and Jerusalem because of their wickedness, but it's brought back in Jesus and then ultimately fulfilled. It's ultimately fulfilled when we get to Revelation. All right, just hang on. Okay, now we're going to go to question number 3.
Our boys are saying hello. This is Micah.
All right. So we're going to go on to question number 3.
Okay, so question number 3.
Number 3 says this: discuss and explain the difference between prediction and promise. And it says, think of examples in your own culture that will help to illustrate the difference between them in the Bible. So using things that you know to talk about the way it is in the Bible. So prediction and promise. What's the difference there?
And something because we just heard on the radio Western lose, which was sad. But anyway, because we love the basketball, especially we love the basketball.
We love the basketball.
Walmart. But anyway, we love the NCAA tournament. And any tournament games, and so it reminds me of the bracketology that everybody does. Everybody fills out their brackets, their predictions on who is going to win the tournament and who is going to win each individual game. And you'll have one person in the country that maybe has a near perfect bracket. Nobody, I don't think anybody's
ever had a
perfect bracket. Which is something that, how many games is that? I can't remember how many games.
I can't remember now.
But there's 64 teams.
64 teams now.
And then you break that down anyway, however many games it is, it's definitely not 400 that Jesus fulfilled. Jesus fulfilled those 400 predictions made about him.
Right.
And nobody can even fill out a perfect bracket. Mm-hmm. So, anywho, but it would be like the difference in prediction and promise. Somebody, making all these predictions in that
on what team is going to win,
on what
in the
team is
bracket.
going to win, and then like some of them come true, some of them don't. Whatever, it's really not a big deal because
That person that wrote the predictions,
they don't have.
they're not playing the games. They
No.
have no stake in what's really happening. They're not going to change the outcome of anything.
Right, and if I'm, say I'm Louisville, I think they're the only one in Kentucky that's going to make the tournament this year. But say I'm Louisville, it doesn't matter that Byron predicts that I'm going to win the whole thing. It doesn't matter.
It doesn't
it
change
matters
anything.
how I play.
Right.
However, if Byron and I promise our children that we're going to watch, say the Final Four with them on TV, and we're going to pop the popcorn, and we're going to, have a big family night where we watch the game, and then if
We promised it.
and if we don't do it, then that's terrible, and it's it breaks
It's
trust,
breaking the
it breaks
promise.
relationships.
So the promise you're involved in,
Right.
you make something happen.
Right. Or like in the, kind of what we talked about, how God does, say we promised him we'd watch the Final Four. Well, what if we did them one better? What if we bought them tickets to the Final Four
Right.
and went and watched it in person? That's not breaking the promise. That is giving them something better.
More than
what-
yeah, it's the promise ultimately fulfilled.
Right.
Yeah.
And so God sometimes does that. That was my,
Real
pop
world.
culture
Yeah.
thing.
So the difference here, and what's interesting, I know,
I have
and
no words.
the difference in and why it's important because predictions are, you can predict anything about something. That leads down one path. But the promise, God is, when he makes these promises, he's in it. When he made these covenants with Israel and with the nations and with us, like, he is engaged in it. He is a player in that. And that's the difference in the predictions and the promise. It's, your role in it, like what you play, the personal side of it. So the promises are personal. They're very personal. And that goes to the personal relationship of God with all of us. And then that personal plan that he has to bring all nations to him.
Yeah. And something that the book said, it says, once a promise is made, something of my character is invested in it. Can I be trusted? Will I keep my word? Mm-hmm. And so for God, when he made those covenants with, Abraham and with Moses and with the people of Israel, with David, he is staking his name on it. And
Right.
you see in the Psalms where David, kind of says that back to God. It says, Lord, because of your unfailing love, do this. And he what's the word? He pleads with God according to how he knows him in covenant. Mm-hmm. God has said, I'm going to be with you. I'm going to love you with an unfailing love. And so David is saying, okay, well then in your unfailing love, please do this for me.
Right.
And so, and God does it, because he honors the commitment that he made.
Right.
And in that, he also, this infinite God, omniscient, omnipresent, omni-everything, also kind of ties himself down to humanity.
Yeah.
And to our ultimate good, no matter what. Like, we can't lose that, and that, what is it? There's neither height nor depth nor anything else in all creation. And there's lots of other things, yeah. Nothing can separate us from the love of God that's in Jesus Christ, because he promised it, and he
Right.
can't deny who he is. He can't go back on his promise.
He can't go back on his promise.
No matter what we do.
Yeah.
Which is, that's amazing.
And that's also another good reason to read the Old Testament, because you can see your life spelled out in the Israelites. Like, they kept making the same mistakes over and over and over, and we do, yet God still fulfilled his promise to them. He still has Jesus who will rule in that line of David. So he still is holding his promise to them, and he will hold his promise to us as well.
Mm-hmm. And something that the book said I thought was really cool. It says, by the end of the Old Testament, we are left expecting God to do again what he has done so often before.
Yeah.
And I think because he does, he keeps his promises.
Yeah, he does.
So God keeps his promises.
God keeps his
and
promises.
I think
That's a good place to stop because what you should learn in this chapter is that like there's hope and there's promises fulfilled. That fulfillment. That's the word I was trying to think this whole time.
Yeah.
Fulfillment.
Yeah.
There's
and
fulfillment.
even when you think that all is destroyed, like the people of Israel when they were in exile, and then when their temple is destroyed, and then they have nothing, because of God's promise, and only because of God's promise. Sometimes there's always redemption.
Yeah.
And there's always God always makes another way.
That song, God will make a way where there seems to be no way.
Yeah, because of his promises that he's made to us.
Right. He is invested in it.
Yes.
He is invested.
Yeah.
Personally. Okay.
That's awesome.
Yeah, it is.
So I think, what does it say? Some of my friends at school got me this bracelet, and it reminds me of this very thing. It says, "God is within her; she will not fail." I will fail all day, but God in me, I cannot fail.
Right.
And that song that He hasn't failed me yet.
Yeah, He never fails me yet. Yep.
I mean, it's just He doesn't.
He doesn't.
He always proves true.
Yes.
So
every time.
anyway.
So hopefully, hold on to that truth of who God is, and we will pick up our next time with questions 4 and 5.
And 5 is a doozy.
Yeah.
So look at that maybe before.
These are, I talked to, who did I talk to the other day? They were talking about these. Was it, I don't remember who I was talking with now. Oh my goodness.
Well, Roberta sent an email.
Maybe it was Roberta.
Which I haven't responded to, and I'm sorry, and I will.
Maybe it was
and
Roberta.
Then we were talking to Jean, too,
maybe
I think.
Jean. Maybe it was Jean. Maybe it was one of them. Just said, maybe been Roberta's email, just the depth of these questions and making you think. I mean, you really have to think through these. It's really great stuff to think about because it really starts to make a lot of connections on the whole story of the Bible. But you really have to think. So I'm glad that we're doing just a couple questions at a time.
And especially now at Easter.
Right, yes.
Thinking back to the Jesus of the Old Testament is really important at Easter.
For Easter, yeah. To really understand the fruition of everything that's happening. Yeah. I agree.
It's cool stuff.
All right, well, listen, you all have a wonderful day, and we hope to see all of you soon. Yes. Bye.
Bye.